Hi, Gareth Lewis, Psychic Medium here, and tonight I'm in Penrith at the Players Theatre. And now I'm going to show you just a few messages from tonight's show. So I hope you enjoy them, and please visit my website for more shows and more clips, which I'll be posting very soon. So as I work here, I know that I've got a gentleman in the spirit world, and he makes me feel before he passed, he makes me aware here of, I want to say, more problems with the throat area, because I'm not going to say cancer or anything like that because I've not got that, but I do feel as if I've got problems with the throat. And he makes me aware here of being able to get his voice out, to be able to get his words out there. And I do feel that link into the family with this gentleman. I do feel as if I've got kind of a fatherly kind of feeling with him. So that could be father or grandfather, but I just feel that kind of link with him at the moment. But I know as if I've got a lot of problems around the throat area with this gentleman. And, oh hello love, you was quick, wouldn't you? Let's get it over and done with. Is that what you're thinking? No. But I know here, just bear with me just for a second and we'll just make sure. But it just makes me feel here that this condition, I do feel that it got progressively worse. Okay, so when I say that, I know that I had it for quite a while before it got to the stage of I can't get my voice out, I can't get my words out like I would like to. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying this was only a few months or a couple of years or so. I feel it was a longer period stretched out. Does that make sense, Mama? Are you sure?
Yeah, it went on for a long time.
It went on for a long time. I just said that. Okay. Tell me something I don't know, all right? And then I can just put it back to everybody. It makes me look good, you see. So you understand the throat? But you understand where it's the throat area. Okay, probably the throat area. That's fine. Because I know as I've got this condition around this area. Okay. And but I know, like I said, struggle getting the words out more towards the end, definitely. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so you understand, that's fine. And I feel here that he gives me this impression of being someone. I'm going to say to you that he gives me this thought here, as if he doesn't like to be spoken over. Okay, does that make sense? If I'm talking, listen, and then when it's your turn, come in. Does that make sense? Because strangely enough, it kind of gives me this feeling. When you was just explaining that, I got a feeling here, oh, she's off. She wouldn't have done that with me. Okay, and I wasn't being rude with you, I just got a feeling, you know, and she kind of makes me aware he wouldn't have liked that, you know, because I feel quite a gentleman of a strong character with him. You know, he makes me aware here that before he passed to the spirit world, he makes me understand that there was either 2 or 3 people who cared for him, but I want to say on more of a regular basis. Okay, and I want to say that not all 2 or 3 were there at the same time. So I feel as if I've got some kind of pattern, or if you want to use the word, like a shift pattern. Does that make sense? Because he makes me feel as if we took it in turns. Does that understand? And he makes me feel here as if like, he kind of makes me aware that there were certain times where he really didn't want anybody there. Okay, and he makes me feel here as if I'm getting that more cantankerous feeling with him. You know, and that more kind of like, don't bother. Do you know? Do you know what I mean? Don't bother. And that's not because he didn't want to be here, not because he didn't love anybody. I just feel he got to a stage where it's like, what are you doing? Don't bother. Does that make sense? Okay. And it kind of makes me feel here that he says, you know, I was someone who would have worked all my life. I was someone who was very positive. I was someone who always fought. And, you know, he said, but I fought for a long time, Gareth. Does that make sense? When it was a surprise towards the end, you felt that feeling of as if he was kind of giving up. Does that make sense? Because that wouldn't have been his character, giving up. But I do feel he's surrendered, shall we say. Does that make sense? Okay. And he makes me feel here that when he passed the spirit world, he talks about either 3:30 or 4:15. I feel as if that's a period of time where he either passed at that time or there was some connection to that part time. Does that make sense? Well, I'm not but you understand that time period, okay? Because he makes me feel here some connection towards that time, okay? And he makes me aware here that he talks about in his, I want to say more in his younger day, he gives me this feeling of being very, I don't know whether he liked the dancing or he liked going to the dance halls or whatever it was, because he makes me feel as if he liked to get dressed up and he liked to do the dancing. Does that make sense? And it kind of makes me feel here, he didn't just have 1 or 2 partners, he had a few. So in other words, it was kind of like, whoever was there, he would just dance with. Does that make sense? So I do feel he could go by himself, you know. And it just makes me feel, not there for any untoward reasons, just because he liked to go and do the dancing. Does that make sense? Okay, and he makes me feel here, he says, you know, where I was sat before I passed, where I was sat for the days leading up before I passed, okay, he kind of makes me feel as if everything was around me, okay. He makes me aware here, it kind of gives me this feeling of, would he have sat where he would have had a radio next to him?
TV.
No, I kind of feel more of a radio.
In his bedroom. Yeah.
I feel as if I've got it kind of calls it a wireless. You won't remember them, will you? Yeah, I do as well, but we don't admit it. It's a radio without wires. Anyway, he makes me feel here as if I've got my wireless. Okay. And so I just feel it was always next to him, you know. But I do feel it's more of an older kind of model, so it's something we've had for years. Does that make sense? Okay. Because he just shows me that kind of, it's like an old bake light or something, you know, that feeling of that. But everything that he had, he kind of just feels, I never changed anything. Everything was historical in my house. You know, I feel as if I had everything and I didn't change him. You know, so I feel that everything in his house was the original from years, and he just kept them, and they carried on working, so why change them? Does that make sense? And he makes me feel here, he says, you know, just tell her that I've been around her recently, where I know that you've been slightly upset, and I kind of feel not upset so much with other people, but I feel more upset with yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. And so I'm not going to talk about the situation, I'm not going to talk about people, I'm on about you. Does that make sense? And it just makes me feel here, he says, you know, in the last couple of 3 days, she's been getting more and more in that anxious feeling of being, you know, looking within a bit more. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. He makes me feel here, he says, you know, like I said before, he did work hard, this gentleman, but I do feel he's very clever. Yeah. Okay. I feel he's very clever, self-taught clever. Yeah. Okay. And he makes me aware here that he could put his hand to anything, and I feel as if I've got quite a few trades with him. I'm not saying professional, okay, but I kind of feel as if he's learned quite a lot of trades. Alright, so I'm not saying that he worked in all these trades. I feel as if he just taught himself how to do the plumbing, or he taught himself how to do the electrics. Or, you know what I mean? I feel as if he knew quite a lot of trades. Right, it just makes me feel here as if I taught myself. I never did them professionally, but I knew how to do them. Does that make sense? And he makes me feel here, he says, you know, is there a problem with your electrics at the moment? Because he makes me feel here, he says, you know, I could quite easily sort that out.
I know, my whole life.
Right, it just makes me feel here, it's your whole life, isn't it? Yeah. You just keep telling him off. But he makes me aware here as if there's something with the electrics. Okay, it's not spirit world, it's electrical. Alright, some people are going, oh, it's paranormal, but it's not. Alright, it's just the electrics. And he kind of makes me feel as if you need to get it sorted. Okay, he kind of gives me a start here that if I was to go into your house and I go into the first room that I would approach, okay, so that, I don't know what room it is, but I know if I go into the first room that I would come to, the first door, would that be on the left? Because I kind of feel as if the first room would be on my left as I'm going in, you see. And he makes me aware here, if I was to go into that room, are we kind of looking at it and thinking it's very tired?
Not anymore, I'm just decorated.
Have you just done it recently? That's fine, okay. Because he makes me, that must be recent.
It was very tired.
Alright, would that be recent though?
Yeah.
Right, because I don't want like a couple of years ago or anything like that. Alright. That, okay, because he kind of makes me feel as if we've been looking at it, it's very tired looking. Because I kind of want to look back at his house, like I said before, about, you know, everything was more of an order and it needed a bit of an upgrade in certain things, okay? But it just makes me feel here, he says, you know, I like going in that room there because it's a lot more bright and not as, should we say, not as dark and depressing feeling, okay? And so I know here that you've done this change around your house. Again, it's all about taking it around, and even though we can't do it now, just know that he's helped you do it. When you was decorating or changing that room, did you have him in your mind?
Oh, no.
Because he kind of makes me feel here as if, I know you said to me before that he would teach you how to do certain little bits, because he makes me feel here as if when you was decorating, you decorated the way he taught you. Yeah. Alright, so it kind of makes me feel as if we always start with wallpaper in the middle, work our way round. Yeah?
I decided not to do the wallpaper this time, too much
but you understand why, that's an example, I'm not saying that's what you did, okay. You make me feel as if everything had to be done. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly this time. Okay. So just to know that he's been arranged, he gives me the name of Eric as well, so I feel there should be an Eric connected to him. Can you understand that?
Not yet.
I don't mind if you say no, okay. He makes me aware here of mentioning the name of Eric, and I do feel that I've got someone where I will connect more on a neighbour or a friendship link there. So just look around where that may be, because he makes me aware that where he used to live, there was either a field or a park towards the side back. But he makes me aware there should be an Eric around that area. So if you can't place it just now, then just think in that area, okay. And he just wants to give that. Is this lady with you next to you? Is she with you?
Yes.
Yeah, do you know her? I asked that because last night I said, is this lady with you? And this lady went, who are? I went, yeah. So, Joe to her says, Mum. But he just makes me feel, he just wants to come around you, and he just wants to say, let's just keep on going because you'll get there in the end. And so I feel there must be something in your mind where you're either thinking about giving up or taking a step back or a step sideways. There's something there what we're not sure about. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Are you sure? Okay. Mum, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Give her a little crack now and again. There's nothing wrong. Child abuse, doesn't matter when they're older. Smack them as much as you want. Okay. I'm joking, don't see me on that. But he just kind of makes me feel here, just keep going, okay? Do what you feel is right, don't give up. Alright, so I feel like I'm in that stage where I'm just thinking, what shall I do here? Okay, so just to know that he's around, sends you a lot of love. Can I leave him with your love there, with his love there, so thank you for your contact. Okay, thank you very much, thank you. Yeah, I know that I've got a gentleman in the spirit world, and he makes me feel here that before he passed, he talks about taking his own life. I know that he makes me understand here. It was more of a circumstance which took him into the depression rather than being a depressive character, if that makes sense here. Because I kind of feel here that it was just something that just got out of control and took him into that spiral of not knowing what to do. Because before that, I just feel that it was someone who would really take life and enjoy it and take it to the max. He makes me feel here that there were occasional drugs around him, but I think what? I'll do that. Scary enough job as it is. And he makes me feel here there's a connection of drugs around him, but I do feel it's more kind of a recreational drugs rather than being addicted to strong drugs and dealing and that kind of thing. It just makes me feel that he wasn't shy of the odd smelly tobacco stuff. But he makes me feel here that I kind of feel like I wanted him more in my early 20s with him. So can anybody understand a gentleman who would have passed like that? Connection with drugs, took his own life. I don't feel he passed that long ago. I feel he's passed in the last 3 to 4, 5 maybe tops, but in the last 3 to 5 years. Can anybody understand a gentleman who took his own life? No? It's okay, that's fine. He makes me feel here that he gives me a connection where there's a name of Darren connected somewhere. So I feel he should connect around the name of Darren as well. So nobody can place this at the moment. Oh, that's good. Have you all got sleep? Okay, so where are we going? I feel that I'm on this side here. I feel as if I'm probably more drawn to the middle to the back with this gentleman. And if I've got one thing wrong, then that's something I need to correct. But I just feel here, if I start again, the gentleman in the spirit world, into his early mid-20s, took his own life. I feel it was more, how do I get into this situation than being a depressive character. He makes me aware here as if he kept trying to change the way he was and people kept bringing him back or something to that kind of feeling. He makes me feel like we've been dragged back all the time. So nobody can place this. No? The ladies towards the back there, second row towards the back, you've just taken a drink. You two can't understand any of that, can you? No? And in that section there. No? Nobody can understand a young gentleman who took his own life. No, that's fine. I kind of feel I'm drawn there with it. Okay. So, he also gives me a connection with the name of Steve or Stephen as well. So I feel there should be a connection there. What?
Yes.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, the name Stephen, yeah.
And what about someone who took their own life?
Yeah.
Okay, and what about every now and again being involved or around drugs or going to mind the occasional wacky stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, what can you not understand?
Darling.
That's the only thing what you can't understand. That's fine. Okay, but everything else you can understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming in at such a late time. Not locked here, but it's not fighting if I'm not going to careful. But I know here that it makes me feel about the importance of it was being, I feel it's going to be pulled back into something I don't want to be in. I feel it's going to be dragged back into a situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. He makes me feel here that before he passed the spirit world, I don't want to say that this was either his first attempt or his first thought. I feel as if I've been there before. Okay, it makes me feel that within another year before he passed, I feel as if I've been there, I got myself out of it, and then it's as if it came back again. Does that make sense? So he makes me aware here as if the situation repeated itself. Do you know what we sorted all that out? You know, and then also it came back again. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And he makes me aware here of something to do with blame as well. So I feel that after he passed, as if people went out and either tried to get their own, not revenge, but, you know, I kind of feel as if people went out and thought, well, it's your fault, it's, you know what I mean, and some kind of, bless you, love, some kind of little vigilante kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because it kind of makes me feel here, there's, even today, I know he said it's a little while ago, but it kind of makes me feel even today there is still anger towards certain people.
Yeah.
You know, where they met them, they bring it back up again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And he makes me feel here, he says, you know, that I was someone who would have helped anybody. Yeah, I just feel that I just got dragged into a certain situation I couldn't get out of. Yeah, and I feel he was someone who was nice and polite. You know what I mean? I just feel that what was going on around him was a different world than what he was. Does that make sense? Okay. He makes me feel here that there was some kind of either fight or argument in the last day or two before he passed. You don't know that. Okay. He makes me aware here as if there was some altercation of some sort in the day before or the 2 days before, but you can't place that. That's fine. I'd rather say you don't understand that. You just remember I've said it, you've understood the rest of it. Okay. He makes me feel here that he was someone, and I do want to say that it was such a shame because I feel as if he just got himself onto a right path. I feel as if he either just started off onto a new career or started off onto a new pathway in his life, but it just makes you feel of a new start. Does that make sense? Are you sure? Okay. And he says, you know, I was someone who would have always tried to improve myself. He said, but for whatever reason, I just kept being brought back. It keeps being brought back all the time. Okay. And I'm trying to work out where he's talking. Were there 2 or 3 people either after him or intimidating in some way?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because this is where I keep saying all the way through being brought back. I'm like, I just keep saying it, you have to give me more. And it just makes me feel as if being intimidated in some way, where I feel as I've got no option.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And he kind of gives me this feeling here of being around you recently, and he just wants to give you that support, like whatever friendship you had or what connection you had, that you would have given him or his family after he passed, okay? And he just wants to give you that support at the moment. He makes me feel that this year, I kind of feel has been quite a multi-event year, a lot of changes, okay? We'll understand there's been a lot going on this year, whereas it feels like we're on the right path, and all of a sudden, it's changed and we're on a different path, and I feel as, oh, we just started that one, now we're doing something that, you know, I just feel it's just been one thing after another, where every time you think you're on the right road, something stops you, and you get taken off and you're doing something else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay, because it just makes me feel here, you know, just stick at it there, because I feel that in the last couple of weeks, you've either just been given a new opportunity, or there's something which is about to start.
Yeah.
I feel as if I'm looking, you know, it's not long now, but I know that this is going to be something where you know it's not going to change. okay, because I just feel the possibility of it stopping like it has done before. It can't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense? I just
Yeah.
feel here as if you know that this is it. Okay. He makes me aware here of, as I say, just being around you, but I don't know whether you're still in contact with a lady or a young girl around him, what would connect with him. Because he makes me feel that's a lady, a young girl, who would have either just had a child, what would connect with him.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So he makes me feel someone close to him has not long just had a child. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. And he makes me feel here that he just wants to send out the thoughts to that person. I feel this is their, I'm not going to say they're struggling with the child, but I think they're struggling, you know, like some ladies do when they've had a child, just getting themselves back into that frame.
Yeah.
Okay. So he just makes me feel here about just sending that thought and thank you for helping there if you're still connected with that lady. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And he just, I know I mentioned the name of Steve to you before, but he makes me aware here of the name of Paul as well. Does that make sense? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So I need them to go back and just leave you with the name of Darren, because you couldn't understand that name.
Yeah.
Whether it's Darren or Daz, okay. But he makes me feel here where that name is in connection somewhere to how he passed. Okay, so whether it's to the people who he was hanging around with or the situation he was with, there's a name there what connects. Okay, so that's why I'd like you to look at that. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this, and